Good afternoon, everybody. This session is AT Service Delivery Models with Partners and Subcontractors. And our presenters for today are Linda Jaco from Oklahoma Able Tech, Whitney Doyle from FAST, the Florida AT program, and Melinda Dolezal from the New York Trade program, the AT program. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. And just a couple of reminders to use the closed captioning. Use the closed captioning button on your screen. If you have any questions or comments, there it is. If you have any questions or comments, please enter them in the chat window and we will address those toward the end of the panel. Just a reminder on upcoming events following the Leadership Symposium, check out the AT3 Center events page. And we'll also be sending out registration links for all the events on the AT3 listserv. And definitely please complete the post-webinar survey after the Leadership Symposium to talk about the sessions that you appreciated and what you'd like to see in the future. So go ahead and move to the next slide. And I'm going to go ahead and just kick it off and introduce Linda Jaco with Oklahoma Able Tech.
Thank you, Marty. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. It's really been a fun week on top of our other jobs to have an opportunity to get to see everyone again and be with you. So this afternoon, I'm going to take a few minutes to explain a little bit about a collaboration that Oklahoma Able Tech has had now since 2005, where we work with a variety of Oklahoma partners to offer a statewide AT demonstration and short-term loan program. Please move to the next slide. So basically, in short, because it's not a complicated process, there are key players, and those key players consist of various organizations across the state that provide direct AT-related services to Oklahomans with disabilities. Various examples they could be providing hearing services, vision services. Basically, I'm going to read to you the 10 categories of AT: speech communication, computer access, daily living, learning cognition development, environmental adaptations, seating, positioning, mobility, recreation, and yes, even vehicle modifications. And then, of course, the other key player in this is Oklahoma Able Tech. Next. So to be more specific, and you'll see there's quite a variety of different partners that we're working with, from the Alzheimer's Association to both INCOG and KEDO. They are both AAAs in our state. The More Autism Center, Sooner Start, which is the Part C early intervention program in our state under IDEA. The Shoals Center, which is a hearing center, Stillwater Eye Care, that one's obvious. Pathways Therapy Center, the OSU's Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders that offers a speech language program and trains speech clinicians. The Children's Center, which is a rehab hospital. New View, which is a low vision partner that's located both in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. And then, as you'll see, 3 vehicle providers: Handicap Vehicle Services, Newbie Vance Mobility, and United Access Mobility Auto Sales. Next. So how does this work? Well, basically, as I already indicated, this started in 2005 as a result of the 2004 reauthorization of the AT Act. So we created memorandums of agreement because we knew there was going to be a need to coordinate a consistently provided and affordable, comprehensive statewide demonstration and short-term loan program to Oklahomans with disabilities. So we tried to think about how we were going to do that in an affordable fashion. And we reached out to a variety of organizations who provide services to individuals with disabilities, with the offer to provide them AT devices based on the type of organization that they have in order to expand and enhance service delivery options in exchange for AT demonstration and short-term loans under the AT Act. So basically, we're going to give you devices if you're a vision partner, we're going to give you vision devices if you'll, in exchange, do these demonstrations per the definition in the AT Act and provide us monthly data. Next. So what are some of the items that we wanted to be careful that we had in the MOA? Well, we put a section for partners and a section for AbleTech, as you'll see. What's the partner responsible for? That they had to provide a primary contact person within each organization. So we always had a go-to person. Space, of course, to house the AT. Acknowledgement of this partnership on various marketing materials. Development of operational procedures that at a minimum would be in keeping with what we do. So maximum AT loan term to not exceed 42 days. Borrowers would need to be responsible for returning items in the same condition, excluding normal wear and tear. Borrowers are responsible for the cost of the repair, or if not returned, the replacement of a device. Demo and short-term loan reports to AbleTech by the 5th of each month following the previous month. Routine maintenance of all AT equipment. Next. Participation in an annual AT inventory report. So we're clearly checking to see what's still there, what's lost, broken, stolen. Attendance at 2 annual trainings. Submission of 4 annual AT success stories, utilizing an AT success story photo release form that we had approved through OSU, Oklahoma State University. Completion of an AT demonstration survey. Completion of an AT short-term loan survey to be completed by the borrower and returned with the device. And so you know, we do shipping free across the state. Partners usually are a drop-in, take, and return. Next. What is AbleTech responsible for? Purchasing and barcoding of all the equipment. AbleTech maintains the ownership of all the equipment. There's a 30-day out clause in the MOA. And if at any time a partner doesn't choose to continue with us, or for whatever reason we choose not to continue with the partner, there's that 30-day opt-out clause to ensure that both parties have the opportunity to cease the MOA. Conducting an annual inventory with each partner, we're responsible to do that. AbleTech at that point determines and removes any obsolete or underutilized equipment. If they're not, if borrowers aren't borrowing, if demos aren't happening, then we remove that equipment. If they want new equipment, that's based on how frequently that equipment is being demonstrated and borrowed per the data, or loaned per the data. Purchasing and barcoding of any new AT for each partner on an annual basis, of course, contingent on available funding. But generally speaking, we've been able to do this very consistently for 15, going on 16 years. It depends on the type of partner, because obviously AAC is a lot pricier than daily living. So take those kinds of situations into consideration. And we provide a reporting format for success stories with release forms, as mentioned before. Next. We're also responsible for providing both the AT demo and short-term loan surveys. We then, in turn, provide quarterly reports to the AbleTech Advisory Council and annual reports to ACL. We provide monthly newsletters to all partners. That is a way that we keep them aligned with each other and communicate with them and share success stories and do other fun things. And of course, we coordinate the training at both of the annually mandated partner meetings. Next. So what did we accomplish? I just give you a snapshot of last year's FY20 data. AbleTech and its partners provided 6,105 AT device demonstrations to 11,318 Oklahomans across the state. And we also were able to provide 2,601 AT short-term loans to Oklahomans across Oklahoma. Next. That's my contact information. If anybody wants to learn more about this or for us to share a copy of the MOA with redacted names, just so that you can see what it looks like, we would be more than happy to do so and have done so with other states in the past. So I tried to be very brief so that there's time left for others. And it's really a pretty basic, simple story to share. So thanks so much for your time and attention.
Hi, everyone. This is Whitney. We're going to jump into what we do here in Florida. So if you could kick us off with the next slide, please. So FAST has been around, and we're the Florida Alliance for Assistive Services and Technology is our full name. We've been around since 1994. Some of our contractors have actually been around since about that time as well, though our newest demonstration center contract was awarded in 2015. And then our reuse centers that we're going to talk about also came around in about 2015. So we have 11 subcontractors for all of our services. Our regional demonstration centers, they do our device loans, demos, trainings, and I&As. And then our reuse centers do our reuse activities, so our exchange and our recycling refurbishing. The different RDCs across the state, we have 2 universities, one's public, one's private, 2 nonprofit organizations, which one, the Family Cafe, is actually statewide, and Hope Haven is regional, and then 1 Center for Independent Living and 1 hospital. Our regional reuse centers, however, are all housed within Centers for Independent Living across the state, which we have 5 partners there, but we have 17 CILs across the state. So we don't really cover all of the state with our reuse program. Next slide, please. Our lead agency contract, so I bring this up because our lead agency is VR, and we historically have had a ton of deliverables written into our state contract. Lately, we have, as I mentioned in our affinity group conversation, we've gotten a better relationship with our state VR, so we've been able to remove some of those deliverables. So now what we have, which is listed here for fiscal year 2021, this directly mirrors what we're reporting in the APR. So before, we were sharing deliverables between ourselves at the state headquarters in Tallahassee and all of our subcontractors. So we had like so many public awareness events we had to do, so many website hits we had to report. So we were able to take all that stuff out and just focus on what we need to do in the APR. So these are based on quarter because we moved our contracts to be quarterly with our regional demonstration centers. Next slide, please. So we are an implementing agency. What we do to help the contractors, we host monthly meetings so our regional demonstration centers can get together and our regional reuse centers can get together. We also host bi-monthly trainings. So since all of our training numbers come from our subcontractors, what we try to do is use our headquarters networking system to get more attendance at the regional demonstration centers trainings, which just has been really nice with the virtual environment. We've been able to do these virtual trainings and get a small but steady amount of participation across the state. And we can also reach our full network. So that's our way of helping them get those deliverable numbers. We also host a monthly vendor spotlight so we can try to help them stay up to date on the different AT devices that are around. And then public awareness events. Currently, we at headquarters do all the public awareness events for the state. Unless it's something that's a regional event that's in their area, then we might ask them to attend. But if it's a statewide event, we at headquarters either send staff to that, or lately it's been virtually, which has been really nice. So we're able to participate that way, as again, a way to try to push participants to the subcontractors without them having to kind of pull in their own users. However, they are obligated to serve as many people as they agree to, so they also have to do some marketing themselves. I don't mention on here, but we do I&A activities at our state headquarters as well. We have a help desk. Those I&A activities are not part of our VR contract, so anything we do at the state headquarters is just icing on the cake for what our regional demonstration centers do. And then same with our loan program. We used to actually count deliverables at the state with our loan program, but as a way to help the regional demonstration centers, and because we don't currently have any AT experts here at staff at headquarters, we connect anyone who reaches out to us for a loan, and their actual communication is with a regional demonstration center, even though we might be behind the scenes mailing the device and getting the device back, but they're actually talking to the RDC staff so that they can make sure if they need a demonstration or if they need any INA, they're helping them instead of us at headquarters. And then the program that we do pretty much solely at headquarters, we do our state financing. We have an AFP and a telework loan program. Our regional demonstration centers do help with referrals to our financing, but for the most part, we're doing that at headquarters. Next slide, please. So this is how our current RDCs are structured. They are one-year contracts, and like I mentioned, there's 6 of them, and they're $90,000 contracts. Historically, we found that we were doing requests for proposals, but we couldn't really see if we were doing them at any sort of incremental period. So I just determined it must have been in frequent periods. We are this summer opening up the 6 RDC contracts for bid to kind of try to see if we can get some new blood in there. So we'll see how that goes. They previously had annual deliverables. We switched to quarterly because with our state contract with VR, we have quarterly reporting. So we don't report monthly to the state, we report quarterly. And at the end of that quarter, if we don't hit those deliverables, we have financial penalties from the state. So we thought, since we literally aren't doing any of the programming, we're not going to absorb those financial consequences for our dear sweet subcontractors. So we moved their deliverables to quarterly, and this is what they're tasked with doing on a quarterly basis. This is actually, I believe, all the deliverables that are in their contract. And if they don't hit any of these, we kind of see if maybe some of the other ones went over so that as a state we hit the number. And if that's the case, we don't penalize anyone, even if one particular regional demonstration center didn't hit their numbers. But if we had a deficit and, 5 of them met their numbers exactly and the other one was shy, so FAST is going to be penalized, we do pass those financial consequences on to our regional demonstration centers, which we believe this past year with COVID was the first time we've ever actually had to do that. For the most part, they've been able to reach all of their goals. And we were forgiving in the beginning of COVID. It was kind of the end of the year towards September when the state, Florida, we've been open up as long as we can be. So they weren't as forgiving to us towards the end there. So we did have to pass on some consequences. Next slide, please. So this is a territory map. I apologize, I'm not giving you the most sophisticated of our maps, but what I like about this one is it shows you the population on the regions that we break up here. So our ATAC, our AT Advisory Council, has been looking at how we can serve the state more equitably. As I mentioned, we have 6 contracts. They're all the same amount of money for the same amount of deliverables. So the Gulf Coast region up in the northwest part of Florida that has 4 counties, their population is much lower, but they have the same amount of money that Miami-Dade does down in South Florida, which you can see they have almost 7.6 million people. So the lower populations are being overserved and the larger populations are being underserved in our current model. Next slide, please. Our regional reuse centers. So we have 5 of those. They are also one-year contracts and they're at $10,000. They began in 2015, and since it's only $10,000, according to our fiscal policies, we don't have to do competitive bids for those, so we can just kind of award those as we see fit. These are the deliverables that are in those RRC contracts. I do think we're going to revisit these because truthfully, we've been having people post items on our device exchange website, but we don't actually know if they're exchanging anything. So it's nice that they can post things, but we don't know if they're getting stuff back out into the community. Next slide, please. So this is looking at our RFP process, and I'm not going to go into a ton of details. I listed everything here on the slide so that people could reference it going back. We do have all of the stuff that the state requires. Since we're quasi-governmental, we have to follow state regulations. So we have a lot of stuff in here that our whole proposal is maybe like 40 pages or so, which seems to me like a lot. Next slide, please. So the key components that I think are really important, we talk about the background of FAST to make sure that our partner organizations know who they're getting into bed with, essentially, scope of what we're asking of them. And what's interesting this round, we know how much money we want to give a region, and we know the set amount of deliverables for the region. So we're going to be really looking at what, if that organization really understands the need, if they really understand AT, if they actually have people who can teach people about assistive technology versus just no one on staff knows about AT, but they want the money. And then looking at how they're going to do that professional development, which is that quality assurance and quality improvement system. It might be something that FAST can help with as far as professional development, but we want to know that if they don't have staff that are on board, or if their staff need to be constantly learning new things, that they have a vested interest in that as well. And then the budget with the budget narrative. And we're asking for 3 references in our RFP. And we're saying that we're guaranteed to call at least 2 of them, and they need to be other partner organizations. So I think that's going to be really interesting and very telling as we get these proposals in. So I'm kind of looking forward to that part, especially. Next slide, please. So our Assistive Technology Advisory Council is our board of directors, which is kind of nice because it's one body, so we don't have to worry about making 2 sets of people happy. They are going to form a selection committee. So the idea is this coming June, we're going to have our new service delivery model redesigned and voted on by our ATAC. And then they're also going to approve their request for proposal, which fingers crossed, we can get both of those finalized into them by the month of June. So they're going to create a selection committee. It's probably going to be more than 3 members, seeing as we're going to open up the entire state for the demonstration centers. But this is how we're breaking down the scoring rubric. You can see that we're putting more of a weight on that service delivery model, which again, in the past, they actually got to determine how many deliverables they were going to give us for the dollar amount. And we kind of know how many we want them to give us now. So we might just do like a minimum number and see if any of them are willing to exceed it, which we kind of have a feeling our current partners are not going to want to exceed that, because just as everyone, you know, more demand and not enough money to cover. So we'll see how that goes. We also put a pretty heavy weight on the staffing of the subcontractors, because we know that's pretty important to make sure they actually know what they're doing. Next slide, please. These are our time periods. This is actually pretty nice when I pulled our old proposal to get an idea of how quickly they moved. The last RFP actually had a shorter window than what this is. They started in July and ended in October. So we're going to start in June. Not a whole lot more time, but we're going to do our best to get some proposals in. By the time the RFP is released, we give about 6 weeks for the proposals to be due. And then we have a pretty quick turnaround of a little less than 2 weeks on the proposals being scored. Here in Florida, we do fall under the Sunshine Law. So anytime 2 or more of our members, our board members meet, it has to be publicly noticed. We don't think for this process that it needs to be publicly noticed. So all the board members will individually score and then submit their evaluations, and those will get tallied. And then it'll come together for a board meeting to confirm the results. We do have a process where people can contest the results. If someone feels that their scoring isn't how it should be, or they feel that they were scored impartially, we do have a process written into the proposal where they can contest. That's why we're saying that we're anticipating posting the ranked, and then we give them like 72 hours to contest. And if no one contests, then we start our contract negotiations at the end of August, which would be really great if we hit that milestone, so that we can start our contract dates October 4th, which is the first Monday and the beginning of our fiscal year. Next slide. So this is my final content slide. I kind of wanted to address why we decided that we did want to revamp our service delivery and open up for RFPs this year. Through all of the fun stuff that's happening in the world, and I say fun very tongue-in-cheek, I say that jokingly, we really wanted to see what we could do as an organization to address barriers to access. And through doing that, we realized again that we were overserving the populations with lower amounts of people and overserving them, and then underserving our really dense populations. So we wanted to try to be more equitable in our service delivery. So by doing that, we actually took the percent of people with disabilities per county in Florida based off of ACS's 2019 data numbers. And we gave a dollar amount to each county and a deliverable amount to each county. And then we built up the regions that way. So we are looking at proposing a 12 region model. So that would double the amount of regional demonstration centers we have in Florida. So we'll see if that ends up working. We're also going to start including demographic info. We stopped collecting that a few years back, and we realized we really need to know so that we can know if we're actually serving the state equitably. We may consider longer contracts than the 1 year. And then also looking at our inventory. We haven't done a great job of tracking our inventory. So we've kind of had that conversation of if we should move the bulk of our inventory internally at our headquarters and just ship more stuff out, or if we should continue to let our regional demonstration centers manage their inventory. So we don't have all the answers to those yet, but that kind of got the conversation going on why we want to open up our proposals and go through this entire process and revamp our service delivery. I think the next slide is my contact information. There we go. So if you'd like to contact me, please do. I'm happy to share any of our documents that we have here in Florida. So thank you all.
And Whitney, one question people had is as far as the amount for your $90,000, is that for all 6 RDCs? That's for each one individually, isn't it, for your regional demonstration centers?
Yes, it's 90 times 6. So we put each contract is 90,000. So our whole program for our demonstration centers is the $540,000.
All right. Thank you, Whitney. And Linda.
All right. Woo! Shake off any cobwebs you have, because we're going to talk about the amazingness that is the New York Trade Program. Marty, stop me if I either talk too fast or go too long, because I have a habit of both. So I'm glad I went after Whitney, because a lot of what FAST is doing is kind of a lot of what we're doing as well. But I do want to preface that we literally just put our RFP out a week ago today. So there's a bunch of things that I'm not allowed to talk about, just per my admin team, but I'll do as best as I can. And if anybody has any questions, I'm always happy to answer. So if you want to go to the next slide, or next 2, I should say. We have a lot of title slides. So just to give you guys kind of an idea of what I do, how trade is structured, and what our subcontractors do, it'll kind of help to shape what we've done with our contractors as the entities that they are. So we're the lead agency in New York, and I work at the New York State Justice Center for the Protection of People with Special Needs. We're the only agency of that kind in the country, and trade has been with the Justice Center through its older names, Commission for Quality Care. So that's kind of how we ended up with the Justice Center. We also have funding through 3 state partners, which are Early Intervention, Money Follows the Person, and our VR agency, Access VR. I'll go into a little bit more detail about them later on. If you could go to the next slide. And just to kind of paint a picture for you guys, it looks kind of like a spider mess, but kind of where we are at the Justice Center, we're kind of a pass-through for the funding that we receive from ACL, from our Department of Health and Department of Education, comes through us. We ensure data fidelity and that everybody is following guidelines, and then we disperse the funding to the 12 regional trade centers. So I'm that blue block basically in the middle at the Justice Center. So if you go to the next slide. And this is where I wish I could be more specific, because this is kind of where we invite our contractors to base, their applicability on applying and apply, if they're able. So we invite, anybody through our website and through the New York State Interface Grants Gateway to search for our grant. We define what our benchmarks and deliverables are. We don't have as many as I think maybe other agencies do, but we'll get to why that is. We spell out, all of our state funding partners, federal funding, so there's no surprises. And we do a 5-year contract. I know, some people do 1 year or, kind of based on whatever it is that the funding is going towards. So we do 5 years across the board. Right before the leadership symposium in the last 6 months, we actually undertook a huge project in shifting all of our funding sources onto the federal fiscal year, which made me want to pull my hair out because it was a very long process through a lot of budget amendments. But ultimately, we feel that that will decrease frustrations from our contractors and the headaches that I have to go through and my team has to go through. So again, we're on a 5-year contract. Everybody is now lined up. And we're hoping, like I said, that this will be a better mix down the road. You could go to the next slide. So there's just to kind of give you an idea of how our regions work. There are 62 counties in New York, and we have 12 regional trade centers. 5 of them are independent living centers. 2 of them are state universities. 1 is a USED. 1 is cerebral palsy office or satellite office, and the rest are non-for-profits. So we divide it up mostly by population, and that's why if you look, the New York City region is so tiny, but obviously it's huge in terms of population, whereas the North Country, those top 4 counties, there's only 4 of them, but there's a lot more space in between, the towns and villages up there. So this is historically kind of what our regions have looked like, and this is how they'll be moving forward. You could go to the next slide. So kind of, again, to kind of differentiate my role as opposed to our trade staff's role, this is what I do. People ask me, well, what is, you sit at a desk, even though I'm in my ethereally lit living room. Normally I'm on the road quite a bit to be able to see all 12 of the trade center staff and, be involved in any troubleshooting or technical assistance. My personal scope is limited in terms of direct services. What I mostly do, if that would count toward, services themselves would be things like public awareness, technical assistance, information and assistance, whereas the trade staff do demos, loans, and trainings. So I'm also the liaison between our federal and state partners and the RTCs, also people in the community, outside organizations, really anybody that's not sure what trade is, that's my go-to. I wrote most of the RFP. And to give you some background, I came into trade about 2.5 years into the RFP from when we would have normally put out a new contract. So I was able to kind of see areas that I thought might be good to adjust. And I was able to talk to people like Amy Goldman, Kim Mocha, who's been wonderful. So I, help, and then also my admin team helped tremendously in informing what became the RFP. I also do a lot of in-person and virtual education for my staff, making sure that when a new trade director starts, as quickly as I can, I try to work with them so that they understand the differences between the services that we offer so that they can document accordingly and really understand like what a good, good policies and practices are in order to have somebody have the most information possible to make a decision. I also run our RTC meetings, biannual directors meetings, and our advisory council. I also help maintain data fidelity, sending in quarterly and annual reports. So the state plan for ACL, APR data, quarterly reports with our state funding. And I'm also on a bajillion boards and commissions in New York. So Developmental Disabilities Planning Council, Equipment Loan Fund, and probably, like I said, $1 trillion else that I forgot. But it's good because it helps me network and understand what other organizations are doing in ways that we can kind of help and dovetail with initiatives that are already going on. So in addition to that, that's my role, but the trade centers themselves, if you go to the next slide, and this is important to understanding kind of how we built the RFP. All 12 of our trade centers do all of the services under the AT Act. None of them can be opted out of. So everybody is doing loans, everybody is doing GEMOs, everybody is doing technical assistance. Numbers vary based on things like population, how many staff are available at those trade centers. So we don't compare them to each other. We really look at historical data and go from there. The RTC staff themselves decide what devices they're going to purchase, and they do that by looking at things like waiting lists for devices that they may have. They collaborate with our funding partners at places like Access VR or VR Agency or Early Intervention to talk to their staff to know what is high in demand and what might be good to invest in for our inventories. And they all maintain their own inventories. Occasionally they'll talk to each other if there's something that they're out of to maybe have it shared among them, but it's at the discretion of the loaning RTC. Everything we do is documented in NatTads. This is again spelled out in our contracts, as far as how they maintain their data. I myself check every month in NatTads for every funding partner we have, every activity that we do, and every RTC that does it, to try and catch any discrepancies that may be coming up if somebody is confused about the difference between a training and a demo, which comes up from time to time. The positives to that is that, we're able, again, to see when things are a problem, but on the downside, it's very time consuming, and we don't want them to think we're micromanaging. We're looking at patterns rather than individual days and individual things. And I'm also the front line when it comes to our expenditure reports and claims for payment. Working through trade, I've learned how to speak finance office, which I was not a math major. I was a history major, so it was a huge shock for me. But if you go to the next slide, it's helped in forming our MOUs. Again, early intervention, Access VR, and money follows the person. It's given me a chance to really, have a seat at the table and really kind of say, like, I'm seeing what the trade staff are telling us. I'm seeing what's happening, potentially on a national level and community level. Here's where we think it would be beneficial to build it in. And this year, because COVID wasn't already, the situation it was, all 3 of our MOUs came up for renewal and our RFP came up for revision. So it was quite a year in trade. But just to give you a sense of, the equipment that we are purchasing, and again, our trade staff purchase all of the equipment. EI is birth to 3, Access VR, typically age 14 and up for education and employment, but we do have some wiggle room, and money follows the person for older New Yorkers. This is also our only RFP with benchmarks. They specifically requested that we build in counts for demos, loans, and device purchases. We go by the aggregate, not by individual trade centers, because for some, building in kind of goals for them to get to, we could, but we also, there's been so many things that have happened in New York that ultimately the decision we came to was to monitor and to, again, go by what the total amount is rather than by the individual amounts, which has mostly been successful. But again, if we do see issues, we address them quickly based on our data counts. You can go to the next one. And the one thing that I'll say, that I would recommend for anybody, in the process of going through an RFP or updating a contract, if you can have a seat at the table with your admin team. I know not everybody is the lead agency. Again, we are. Me being able to be there and really explain to them from both the programmatic and the financial side, why we needed certain things to be the way they were, was a huge help, because my admin team doesn't understand what a demo is and what a loan is unless I sit down and train them on it. So we create our own expenditure reports to send to our trade centers that have built-in formulas to break out state leadership and state level activities. So there's no headache on the math side of things for us. And we require that they're vouchered within 30 days so that we don't have outstanding funds just sitting there, because we tell them all the time, this is your money, like we don't want disruptions in services. So I think the fiscal side of things it wasn't something that I really thought about too much, but as I went along with trade and realized the importance of, making sure that we're dispersing funds in a way that, we're holding our staff accountable in terms of accuracy, and also making sure that it makes sense I know that's kind of vague, but again, I can't talk too much about what's out there now that was just released. If you could go to the next one. And the one thing that's really come out of, what happened in New York for COVID, I'm sure most of you know, we were hit really, really, really hard down in New York City, Long Island, the Westchester area. So in crafting this RFP, there was a lot of things that we had kind of been thinking about already, but really after everything happened, necessitated that we build these things in, or at least consider them as much as we could. After everything happened, we had to really kind of figure out what was our status, because we're the lead agency and we contract, we can't tell our contractors when to open and when to close and when to stay home. It's ultimately in the hands of the agencies that are the contractors. So once we figured out, you know, who was doing what, who was at home, who was offering what services, and who was offering walk-ins, it kind of gave us a place to, you know, a starting point to say, where do we go from here? So we're looking at that as something to consider when choosing contractors. And also, you know, trying to be creative and flexible in how we get devices to people. We're looking more at things like postage, drop-off points, collaborations with other organizations that may be able to help with that. And also sharing strategies amongst our contractors moving forward as kind of a best practices. And then another thing that we're looking at is also responding to new and emerging needs as a result of COVID. One thing is we had a lot of requests for devices for distance learning for kiddos that were staying home or were homeschooled. And also, we don't have it here, but things like rehabilitation where people weren't able to physically go. So these are kind of things that moving forward, we're taking into consideration and really looking at staff creativity and how they can meet those goals. Another big thing that came out was things like telehealth. We had a lot of requests for EI kiddos and for individuals using MFP. So again, all of these things we had, you know, were in there, but obviously it made us really kind of do a 180 and say, like, this is an important thing that we need to build in. And then also just the ability to do virtual options in general. And when we told our contractors, yes, you can do virtual activities, it may be more difficult, but really even after, you know, COVID, I don't want to say goes away, but, you know, once we're at a point where, you know, hopefully we can look back and say, you know, virtual models are pretty good for other things as well. So 2020 was a learning experience for us in more ways than one. And the fact that we had to redo all 3 MOUs and the RFP was a bit of a, you know, a learning experience. But I would say, you know, just again, as a last point, last slide is my contact information. But if I can leave anything with you, really have a good rapport with your admin teams and the people that may not understand the trade programmatic side of things. Because again, I'm constantly retraining my own admin team. And definitely look for things outside the box, because that's definitely what we're doing. That's what I got.
Great, thanks, Melinda. And go ahead, go to the next slide. We just wanted to touch a little bit on some of these things that that Linda and Whitney and Melinda talked about a little bit. Obviously, there are things that you definitely want to have in your subcontracting agreements. Of course, you want to have as specific as possible in terms of the deliverables, description of services to be performed, the geographic area to be served, population to be served. I think one of the differences between New York and Florida, I think, in looking at geographical areas, you know, do you want to try to make it the same population served in terms of the numbers, or how you're going to distribute your regions as far as the geographical areas. Payment model and budgets. 2 good models today, obviously. One is there's no funds exchanged, no funds go to the contractor. You're basically providing devices to the contractor for demos or loan in exchange for data. As Linda described in Oklahoma, Texas, I know, is the same thing. They don't exchange funds, provide funds for their demonstration centers, which many of those are IL centers, but provide equipment. And then there's, you know, a lot of programs that do provide a set amount for services, as in New York and Florida. And then there are a few states that actually do some type of pay for performance. Minnesota does. Missouri sort of had a type of that where it wasn't pay for performance, but basically setting amounts of the contract based on the previous year's numbers in terms of numbers of demonstrations. And then of course you want to see, ask, including your contracts, is there a maximum amount? If you're doing a pay for performance, is there a maximum amount of funds that you're going to provide? And if your demonstration center, your regional center isn't meeting those contract amounts or figures, estimates, then is there something in your contract to withhold payment or reduce the payment if the services provided are subpar? Go ahead and go to the next slide. And just a couple of things. We had a meeting of several states a few months ago. And one of the things, of course, we were talking about is the impact of COVID on contractors. And so one of the things, just throwing out some ideas we were talking about is, what about if the person in charge of staffing for that regional demonstration center is gone? Maybe they have, contracted COVID, or for some reason they're going to be missing for a couple of weeks. What do you do? And so it's usually a good idea to maybe put somebody in the contract, have the contractor say, who is the backup if this person is gone? And then of course, having appropriate space for demonstrations and space for if the contractor is providing device loans. And what happens with demonstrations? What happens to the equipment if that contractor, in a lot of cases over the summer, over this last year, contractors more or less closed up, at least in terms of their physical facility. And anecdotes, success stories, and pictures. I don't know if everybody's experience is the same, but sometimes those are hard to get. Some contractors are great with them. Others, it's kind of like pulling teeth. So that's something you really want to spell out in your contract, is a number of anecdotes that you expect, or how frequently you expect anecdotes or success stories or pictures. And then just one other issue, not necessarily related to COVID, but if you have the opportunity, is there some way to brand so that if services are provided by your demonstration center, that they know that those centers are part of your state assistive technology program? We had that experience in terms of states not or consumers not understanding, or agencies not understanding that services that were provided by a particular IL center were actually through the statewide assistive technology center. So if there's a way to brand information, if the center is putting out written materials or something along those lines, or on their website, we suggested that if they have something on their website about their assistive technology services, that they put in there somehow that this is a service through Missouri Assistive Technology. And then the question, are you responsibility? I think Linda talked a little bit about responsibility to maintain equipment. Inventory reports, are you requiring at least an inventory report annually, or sometimes more frequently? And of course, removing obsolete or underutilized devices from inventory. If you've had a demonstration center that's been around for a long time, do they have equipment in there that's never borrowed, that really is underutilized or is completely obsolete? So move to the next slide. And then site visits. I think, Melinda, you mentioned that you have done site visits. I don't know if I assume you haven't done any of those in the last year.
I have actually, but only in regions. It was like a 2-week span where our numbers were going down in the summer, and I was able to visit, stay 6 feet away, because we had new staff that were there, and they'd come on as the COVID pandemic had started. So they were kind of not sure what to do. So I took that opportunity, and then our counts went up again. So I've been home ever since. But normally I'd be on the road, several times a month, out to Buffalo, Rochester, Plattsburgh, Long Island. So I hate sitting at home.
Well, that's huge, because you might go to one of your regional demonstration centers and look around and see where they're displaying their assistive technology devices, and find out that they're in a back room in a small closet. So you don't want that to happen. So that's really important that you have the chance, if you can get out, and hopefully we'll all be able to do that pretty soon, and make site visits. Trainings. I know some of you have maybe 1 to 2 day trainings every year before your year starts for all of your regional demonstration centers. And then it just, in terms of keeping them on top of things, there's several of you that I think do monthly or bi-monthly trainings or webinars for particular issues. It helps them with their staff development. And then vendor visits, of course, if once we can have vendor visits in terms of arranging for vendors to visit some of your regional demonstration centers. And having them participate in conferences. I know in Missouri, when we had an in-person conference, we allowed some of our contractors to attend, obviously without paying any fee, the conference fee for attending. So that's important, again, as far as staff development and keeping them interested, and also keeping them educated about the latest trends or the latest devices or issues. Okay, go to the next slide. And then emerging issues. I mean, how do you deal with a contractor if something pops up, say like COVID? Are there going to be other issues that you want your contractors to work with, like issues dealing with social isolation? And sometimes that's kind of tough to write into a contract, but it's just something that to keep in mind. Hopefully it's not something we have to keep in mind too much in terms of acts of God or things that happen in terms of something along the lines of COVID. Recognitions are huge. One of the things that I think, if you have any way of including some of your demonstration personnel in newsletters or giving them some publicity, that means a ton to them. It really does. And it kind of makes an impact, I think, on other centers too, that they want to have somebody highlighted from their center. Other incentives, Missouri, and I think we stole this from you actually, Linda, provided an incentive for the states that, or the demonstration centers that provided the most anecdotes or the most pictures. And I think that you had, I think we stole that from you. And then the other thing is just partners of people. I mean, in terms of don't always contact people at your contractors just when it's something that you need from them. Sometimes feel free to just talk to them, call them about just to catch up, and without any need for any certain business that you need to conduct. And I think that is it. I go through some of the questions. Oh, Laura Plummer mentioned that they are adding branding to their contract language. And I think that's a great idea because, again, I will tell you that we had done a survey with the Area Agencies on Aging, AT3 did, and we asked them if they were partnering with their state AT programs. And we had a lot of them that said yes, a few of them that said no, but the most said they really weren't sure. And I think a large reason for that is that they were working with maybe regional contractors and really didn't know that those services were through their state assisted technology center. So I think that's a biggie. Angela in Texas mentioned they are going to, they're doing weekly right now, monthly webinars. She says if you could offer something that contributes to their data collection and reporting, for example, on nonprofit uses, our annual report is part of their report to the board of directors. And what were you saying, Linda, about that you posted?
Someone asked the question about their devices plus our devices. Is that the one you're looking at?
Yes.
Yes. In the instances where partners have their own devices, then we request that they also report data on the number of short-term loans and demonstrations from their own collection or inventory of devices, as well as ours. Not all partners have their own. In some instances, they're only getting devices from us. So it just depends on the way that they report. We also ask that they report public awareness. I mean, we have them do what I guess you could say we meet them where they are in their ability to do for us what they can above and beyond the mandated requirements that each one of them must fulfill that I laid out in the MOA when I went through it.
And I think Tracy in New Mexico was asking about what the incentive was. If I remember right, I think we gave them a certain amount of funds for additional equipment. Am I dreaming, or didn't you do something like that, Linda?
We have done a couple of different things. With our Sooner Start program, we provide 28 kits across the state in the various counties, and they use those for assessment purposes. And we have quarterly recognition awards, if you will. We have to be careful at OSU saying anything about awards and winning and all of that. But if they do, and there's a specific criteria for how we assess across different levels, they have to do it in more than one discipline. They have to have an increase in numbers. They have, there's specific criteria for what they must do. Then they get $500, and we purchase additional AT. They provide us with the AT items that they wish, and then we purchase it and send it to them. Then also, there are other things that we, at the end of the year, the one that has consistently done the best gets an additional purchase of $800 of additional assistive technology. For all of our partners, we provide giveaways. So for instance, we ask them at the beginning of the year, would you like pens with your name? Would you like jar openers with your name? So we help them with promotional items that they can do. And we also have when you're talking about the branding, I'm trying to think, a little desktop, I can't think of the word, not a billboard for goodness sakes, but you pull it up and it says on it that they partner with Oklahoma Able Tech to provide this short-term loan program or this device demonstration program. And they have to make that visible in their showroom or place of business so that people do understand that these services are coming as the result of a partnership with Oklahoma Able Tech.
Great. I'm seeing, I don't think there are any other questions.
Marty, did you get the question in the WUVA app?
No.
For our session? It says, this is for programs who use subcontractors and ask them to budget for staff FTE. Does anyone require a minimum FTE per person who is being paid to do our activities? I'm wondering if it gives subcontractors more buy-in and ownership of the work as opposed to them putting 5 people in the budget to do INA at 2% FTE each. We don't require an FTE in our subcontracts.
We have no exchange of money. It is strictly that they are a partner that has a like mission. They are providing assistive. This gives them the opportunity to showcase AT to their clientele. And we barcode, as I said, and if, so we always are maintaining the ownership of the devices. It's not theirs to keep. We're providing them those devices for short-term loans and device demonstrations per the AT Act in exchange for monthly data.
And I don't know of any that do require an FTE. I don't see anything in the chat, but that is an issue. I mean, if somebody is the person responsible for your services at that demonstration center, whether it's an ILO center or whatever it is, there's a chance that they could have some other duties too for the center. So you do want to make sure that they're not just spending, 3% of their time with the AT program. And a lot of times that'll become apparent during the year if depending on what their numbers are, but that is a good point. I think that is all the questions. There were some requests for contracts, and we are going to try to provide examples of the different contracts and different models. I know, Linda, you got a couple of requests for your MOU.
Right.
And so we are going to try to share those with everybody. I do want to thank everybody, thank our presenters. Thanks, Melinda, Whitney, and Linda. Really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody who asked questions and contributed. And I hope that this was a valuable session for everybody.
Thanks, Marty. It was a pleasure.
And I think we're ready to wrap up. I kind of wish that we would have been back in meeting mode so we could have seen everybody one last time before we wrap up. But I do want to go ahead and thank you to everybody. Thanks to all of our presenters. You did a fantastic job. All of us, I think, appreciated great discussion in our affinity groups. Some really valuable information that was exchanged. We really would like for you, when you receive the Post Leadership Symposium survey, please fill that out and give us your ideas, comments on sessions, ideas for future sessions, just anything you have that is creative and that you think would be valuable as a session or an activity, not just sessions, but also activities for the next Leadership Symposium. We do, at the moment, we do plan on having a Leadership Symposium in DC next year, should the grant be awarded to ATAP, and of course, should the pandemic be under control and there's no other major catastrophes facing the country. Go ahead and save the dates for Sunday, March 20th through Wednesday, March 23rd. We're looking at the possibility of having some pre-conference sessions on Sunday. Obviously, we don't have those details ironed out, but just put that on your calendar. And we just so much hope that we'll be able to have in-person meetings and actually be together. Before we leave, I want to turn it over. Are you there, Eliza? I wanted to turn it over to Eliza wants to talk about, we had some ideas for the lead into Assistive Technology Awareness Day that we wanted to share before we left. So,
hello?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I wasn't sure how the technology worked with this session. I have posted a blog today to promote our promotion of the upcoming AT Awareness Day on April the 14th. And I'm hoping everyone can check it out. And if you are a subscriber to the News and Tips newsletter, then you also received a email about this. But what we are doing is, with love for assistive technology, inviting everyone to email me 1 to 3 lines about your favorite piece of AT. We're reaching out to users, families, practitioners, whoever, just so we can raise awareness about assistive technology and the great range of AT that's out there, from, you know, eyeglasses to high tech to low tech to everything in between. So looking for pictures, looking for just a couple of lines, and then we will create a blog post for the middle of the month and also do some social media hashtagging for AT Awareness Day, and hoping folks will email me by the 5th of April with something. And the best way to email for this one is at atprogramnews@gmail.com, but you can also email me any way you have an email for me. All works. Thanks so much.
And again, I want to thank everybody. Thanks for your comments. I see some of your comments. We hope everybody enjoyed it, and it was fun talking to you all. And again, we hope that maybe we'll be able to, in another year, we'll be able to see everybody. in person. Eliza, Amy's asking, could you share that email again?
Sure, it's atprogramnews@gmail.com.
Great. Thanks a lot, and everybody be safe, and we hope we talk to you again soon.